Welcome to It's No Accident, a podcast about the challenges of personal injury and wrongful death law in Florida, one of the nation's most complex legal environments.
You'll hear compelling stories about real cases from our law firm in Tallahassee that will help you better understand your rights and protect yourself from the negligence of others.
I'm Mark Nonni.
And I'm Jaeson Homola.
And this is
It's No Accident.
The title of this podcast is It's No Accident, and I think it's because you and I both believe that for the most part, there are no accidents. I mean, I think, you and I really try to delete the word accident from our vocabulary. And so why do you feel that way? I mean, I know we feel similar on it, but what do you think about when you hear the word accident?
I've tried to, I still say the word accident. Every time I say it, it's like a 4-letter word for me. Every time I say it, I'm like, I got to get that out of my vocabulary. And it's tough because, you see, there's some billboards in Tallahassee right now that say, in almost half the size of the billboard that say accident on them. So, it's a word that is somewhat married to personal injury law. But at the end of the day, I hate the word because it's kind of become a cop-out in our vocabulary. It's like, you just kind of throw your hands, you're in an auto wreck and just kind of throw your hands up and you're like, well, it's an accident. Like, I didn't mean to do that. It was just an accident. But in what we do every day, what you got to do is you got to ask the question, why did that happen? Right. And when you start asking those questions about why it happened, you start seeing that, in the work that we do, there really aren't any accidents. Right. If someone rear ends your car and they say, well, it's just an accident. Well, what do you mean it's just an accident? Like, you just drove into the back of my car? Like, what were you doing? And you start asking those questions. And you start to realize that, people are distracted when they're driving. They're fiddling with their radio, they're texting. Maybe you had a few too many drinks at the bar and you left, and, your attention wanders over to something in the distance, and, you end up hitting somebody. And, there's a reason why these things happen, and it's negligence. It's not an accident. It's negligence. You weren't paying attention to what you were supposed to be doing. And my mom always told me when I got my driver's license that you're driving a lethal weapon on the road, and if you're not paying attention, you can really hurt somebody. And unfortunately, in today's world, people are texting and driving, they're talking on their phone, they're driving. There's never been a time where people are more distracted. So we start to see that play itself out on our roads, and there's more accidents now than there's ever been. And I just said the word accident. Yeah, there are. It's tough. It's tough to get it out of your vocabulary.
It gets ingrained for sure, but kind of like you're saying, I mean, just the word accident, a lot of times implies that it's no one's fault. Right. It's just an accident. It's no one's fault, which is not the case, like you just described. I mean, just because someone didn't mean to run into the back of another vehicle, it wasn't on purpose, doesn't mean they weren't at fault. You know what I mean? It doesn't mean that they weren't doing something negligent like you just described. And so, that's what always, I think always, gets under my skin, so to speak. And, when the word accident is thrown around there, the implication that, it was just an accident, it was no one's fault. It's like you said, I mean, most of the time, 90-some% of the time in the cases we see, there was somebody at fault, and sometimes it was our client, but most of the time, a lot of the time, it was someone who was, being negligent, being distracted, and texting and driving or whatever, like you described. And so, and it's funny too, it's, and I can't remember how long ago it changed, but even, on the reports that the law enforcement does after a car wreck, right. Now they're called crash reports. They're not called accident reports, or anything like that. I think at one point they were in the past, but the vocabulary has been changed in that regard too, to kind of signify that these aren't necessarily accidents or crashes. It's a crash report, and that's what I try to use the word crash or wreck instead of accident.
It's tough though. Yeah, it's tough, and it's interesting too because when you're in a jury trial, before the jury trial starts, there's always going to be a motion that gets filed, and the judge is always going to rule that. You cannot refer to the crash report as an accident report because the defense attorneys will always try to, say, well, the accident report or, something along those lines. You cannot refer to that as an accident report. And, a lot of times judges will say you're not even supposed to use the word accident in the trial. It's almost like using the word insurance in a trial. It's a no-no.
Right.
So it's a word that, it gets used in everyday vocabulary, but we've really tried to nix it from ours.
Mm-hmm. Yep, no, for sure. So, I mean, I guess that kind of leads into you and I both just kind of threw around the word negligence a few times. So maybe we should kind of talk more broadly about that. Like, what is negligence? How do you think about it? Or when you're explaining it to somebody, how do you describe it to people?
Well, the definition is going to be different for everybody.
Sure.
It's kind of a moving target, and everybody's definition is going to be different. The way that I define negligence is I define it as somebody acting contrary to what a reasonable person would do. So, in the same or similar circumstance. So, if you have somebody that you're trying to determine if they were negligent or not, my standard is and there's a reason why. This is my definition. I'll get to that in just a second. But you look to what a reasonable person would do in that circumstance, and if what the tortfeasor or the defendant did, if that falls below that reasonable person standard, then that's negligence. And it's like if somebody's driving down the road and they're looking at their phone, and they've been looking at their phone for 10 seconds, and they're driving down the road, and then they run into somebody, you look at that and you say, well, would a reasonable person have done that? And I think most people can agree that no, they wouldn't have done that. They would have been paying attention to what's going on in front of them. And because they didn't, that's negligence.
Right.
And that can get into a gray area, because then you look at a store owner and somebody slips and falls in their store. Was it negligence that they didn't see the water that was on the floor that had been there for 5 minutes? Was it reasonable for them to not have cleaned that up in the 5 minutes that the spill had been there? Well, you ask 100 different people, and you're probably, well, maybe not 100, but you ask 10 different people, you're probably going to get 10 different answers.
Sure.
And that's going to differ from, a store owner might say, absolutely, that's not negligence. But if you have somebody that was injured and that fell on that water, they're going to be the ones that say, well, yeah, I mean, they should have seen it. They should have cleaned it up. Why didn't they have protocols in place to go around and look and see if there's water? So it's kind of a moving target. And the reason I define it that way is because that's how a judge is going to tell a jury. Right. And at the end of the day, the jury is the one that makes the determination as to whether or not you're negligent. So.
Yeah, no, I was about to say the same thing. I mean, basically what you're describing is one of the reasons why we have the jury system for injury cases, because, like you said, whether someone was negligent in a certain situation, people can view differently, and we have the jury to basically figure out the answer to that question. Was this person negligent, or was this business negligent? I mean, they're the ones that are making the decision, and so, I agree. I mean, I kind of think of it, basically the same thing you said, but the way I kind of think about it or explain it to people when I'm trying to break it down, it is, basically, the concept of negligence is, either doing something that you shouldn't have done, like you just said, texting and driving, you shouldn't be doing that, and then it causes an accident and hurts somebody, and I just said accident, or, you're doing something you shouldn't have done, or not doing something that you should have done. Like if you're a business owner and you got a big hole in the front, right in front of your front door, you should fill that in, and if you don't, and someone gets hurt, that's negligence, and so, it's something that, is, when you hear the legal definition that the judge reads at a trial, it can sound kind of complicated, but when you kind of just break it down and think about it in everyday kind of scenarios, it's pretty clear cut, I think, when someone's been negligent or not, So.
Right, and I mean, it's just because you're negligent doesn't mean that somebody got hurt, too. Right. I mean, at the end of the day, if I'm walking in this office and I stub my toe on something as I'm walking by it, I mean, I got hurt, and I was negligent, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to make a legal claim against myself for injuring myself.
Right.
And somebody driving down the road and texting, the example I gave earlier, you're looking at your phone for a few seconds and you don't hit anybody, you don't cause an injury. You're still being negligent. You haven't caused an injury, so there's not going to be any legal claim. I mean, I think we can all agree that everybody's probably negligent every day of their life. It's just you don't hurt anybody in the process of doing it, so there's no legal claim. And I had a law professor that just called that negligence in the air. It's just negligence. It just happens. You can swing a sword around in the middle of an open room and there's nobody around, and that's negligent. But there's no legal claim there because you didn't hurt anybody. But as soon as you put 15 people in that room and somebody gets hurt, then you've got a legal claim.
Right. No, you're right. I mean, it's funny what you just said reminds me of something that I think we see all the time, especially in medical malpractice cases, right? Basically, the concept you just said of it's possible for someone to be negligent but not hurt anybody, and if there's no injuries, then there's no case.
Right.
Right. And we both get it all the time where something happens at the hospital or the doctor's office where, maybe the hospital or the nurse or the doctor or whoever really did mess up, and they were negligent. But thankfully, luckily, the person didn't get hurt. And so I know you and I have spent a lot of time over the years explaining to people that, I'm sorry the doctor shouldn't have done that. That shouldn't have happened to you. But you didn't get hurt, so you don't have a case. And a lot of times people just don't understand that because the doctor was negligent. It's like, well, yeah, but if you're not hurt, these are personal injury cases. So if you have no injuries, there is no case.
Right. And, the response we get to that all the time is, I could have died.
Yeah.
And yeah, you could have died, and I understand that, and I understand that you're mad, you're pissed off, but at the end of the day, if there's no real damages, there's no real injury, there's no case.
Well, and the law doesn't account for could-haves, right?
Right.
We need actual real injuries, not could have this, could have that. You can't bring that in front of a jury at a trial. Those kind of arguments, the could-haves.
Yeah.
So.
I guess you could, as you're not going to get very far.
Right, that's true.
No matter your injury, Nonni Homola is here to help you recover. Visit noho.law today.